Maybe. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the porch. I am Pastor Deb. On this hot and humid night, I want to welcome Miss Julie Metzikowski. Is that right?
That's
I said
right.
it right. Huh? So, Miss M, better known as Miss M.
Yes.
Yes. So, and I'm so glad that you're here. So glad that you're here. Julie has a story to share that is um, just don't scroll. Just keep listening. And if you guys let us know that you're here in the comments, just say hello. We want to know who's all here with us, and we would like to know where you're from because that's always fun
Oh yeah.
to know
That's
where you're
fun.
from. And Julie, I know that you like a lot of like ancestry things that you're
Yeah.
into that and data collecting. So let us know that you're here. Here's Wessa. Wessa is from Eastern Kentucky. So Wessa is it. I'm glad you're here. You told me, Wessa, that you weren't going to be here. But anyway, I'm glad you're here. So let us know where you're from and that you're here. And I'm gonna, Julie, would you tell me a little bit about your background? First of all, what was your profession? Because you're retired now.
I am.
Woohoo!
I taught high school special education for 35 years
Bless your heart.
and retired 2 years ago. And then, not planning on it, it ended up happening later. I'm back to subbing. So I've been subbing a lot and mostly elementary school.
Oh,
So my colleagues in the elementary school are surprised that I'm there and then I still come back. And I did a fun stint of 3 months as an elementary school counselor,
I remember that. Yes.
and that was a blast. I had so much fun. That was the fastest 12 weeks. The counselor went on maternity leave, but holy mackerel, I'm glad things work out the way they do. I started doing some training, working with mental health and other issues that I noticed students were having at school, and all of that really helped me do the subbing job.
That is
So
awesome.
it's been great.
That is awesome. So, hi, Kathy. I'm glad you're here. Kathy's from Reedsburg. So before we start, though, I want to pray with you because your story is one that I want you to all listen to because Julie's story is one about faith and healing, and it is one about trust. And so I want to pray that God is here with us and lead you to the right parts of your story because there's so much
Yes.
that people need to hear. So let's start with prayer. Good evening, God. God, we are here tonight and we thank you for allowing Julie here with us. And Lord, on this beautiful night, quiet our hearts and our minds and let us hear what you need us to hear. Because God, each one of us have a story, and our stories are meant to help other people. Be with us and guide our conversation tonight and bless all of the people around the world who are watching. In your name we pray. And they all said, Amen. Amen. All right. So, guys, if you're just popping on, let us know where you're from and that you're here and say hello. So, Julie retired 2 years ago.
Yes.
Now she's doing some stuff. But in the middle of that, once you retired from this long 35 years of teaching, I want to start there. Okay. So, well, no. I want to go back just a little bit from there. Tell me about how many siblings did you have?
I have 4 siblings. Okay. The first one I never knew because he died from sudden infant death syndrome.
Okay.
Before the rest of us were born. I have one brother and one sister still living, and then I had a brother who was 387 days younger than me, who was killed in a motor vehicle crash 10 years ago.
So you have 2 living siblings.
Yep.
Okay. So all right.
And I'm just the oldest living.
Okay. All right. Well, now you grew up. You had siblings. You have family. And so now you go put all your life into these kids. And I want to tell you, we were able to be part of that journey, just a little bit of piece of it. And what an amazing job. And I want to thank you for not only loving those kids the way that you did, but also even after they graduated, and I know this for a fact, that you never stopped giving up on them.
Nope. In fact, I had one who just graduated this last June, who called me up yesterday.
Aww.
And he's got some issues. He was devastated his sophomore year when he found out I was retiring. And I told him, hey, I'm not going anywhere. You're going to see me around. And he has. In fact, I was even working with him when I was subbing as a counselor. And he was in jeopardy of not graduating. And I said, look, I'm going to your graduation, so you are going to graduate. And he did. So I'm glad that he is comfortable enough to call me up.
But that just says who you are for your teacher and where your friend is.
I have taught the best students ever. I have been so blessed. There was never one I ever wished I never had. They were all amazing.
That's amazing in itself. So she put in her time with the schools, and she loved on these kids. And then after 35 years, you chose to retire.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that you did a 3-week thing of summer school?
Correct.
Okay, and then let's go from there, because this story, you guys, is something I want you to listen. Hi, Kathy.
Well, and I have to say first, thank you for letting me do this, because I've never had a story that was so strong that, I mean, I've had lots of stories, but it was like, but this one I want it told, and you'll find out why later. But in any case, I always had a passion for my career, and my master's degree was in transition for youth with special needs. And that's what really kept me going. That and watching the kids succeed, it was amazing. But my last year, I just wasn't feeling the passion anymore. I loved my job, but it was time to be done. And when the end of the school year came and I had retired, I still planned on doing the 3 weeks of summer school, which was credit recovery for any high school student who was in need of credits. And I had done that for I don't know how many years. But in any case, that was kind of like my last event that I'd been doing that I still wanted to do. So I got done with that the end of June in 2023. And then started packing up my classroom. I hired a student to help me, which he was a gift from God, I'll tell you that. But we got packed up. We put everything in my garage. And then I had to go up to the Northwoods where my mom lives, because she was having surgery and I needed to be there to take care of her. So that's what I did. And it was the middle of July. She had her surgery on a Friday, and I brought her home. And then Saturday, I noticed coming up the steps in the house, I was winded, which was not normal. I maybe sometimes might have been out of breath, but this was worse than that. And I noticed I would do some things and I would be winded. Well, I did run to the grocery store to pick up some things to make some dinner packages that mom could just pop in the microwave, because her surgery was on her hands.
Okay.
So she couldn't cook or anything. And on Sunday, I'm making a broccoli salad. So I'm chopping up the broccoli, and I had to sit down because I was fatigued and winded. And then finally I got up and I went over and I chopped the onions, and I had to sit down again. What normally took me 15 minutes to do took me an entire afternoon. I couldn't explain it. And I couldn't explain why I was feeling so weird. Well, Monday I had to head home because I had a doctor's appointment a couple days later. And when I got off the interstate at Coloma, I knew I had a fever. So I had to drive home, which was about another half hour after I got off the interstate, or so, maybe 45 minutes. But halfway, I called a friend of mine and I said, can you meet me at my house and help me unload my car? Because I am really sick. So by the time I got home, he was there and he unloaded everything. I took my dog out and I said, just put everything in the living room. I'm going to bed. Well, I took some ibuprofen or something. And the next day I felt a little better, but I wasn't 100%. The day after I had my doctor's appointment, and I told her, by the way, my doctor if I can say, her provider is Ann Fenwick out of New Lisbon.
Love Dr. Ann.
Who is a gift from God by all means. And I told her how I was feeling. So she decided to have some tests done. I ended up staying there. Instead of a 45-minute appointment, I was there 3 hours. She says, I'm going to make an appointment for you to have a CT scan on your abdominal. So I went and had that done. And then I knew I wasn't feeling well. So I went to the grocery store, which is about 15 minutes from my house. Mm-hmm. So on the way home, I'm 3 miles from home, and Ann's calling me, and she said, your abdominal area is clear, but we found a mass on your lower left lung. I need you to go back to the hospital. I'm going to admit you into the ER to have a CT scan done on your lungs. So I did that, and the ER doctor, after the CT scan came back, said I had pneumonia. So he said, I'm giving you 2 potent antibiotics, and that was it. I should be fine. Well, I never really was fine. I mean, there were things that were better, but I never really was fine. And then about 10 days or so later, I end up having double vision. And I go back to the ER, and it's the same ER doctor who who did the lung scans, had them done and such, who ordered a CT scan of my head. And I'm waiting and waiting. And finally, what he had to do was send the CT scan down to Madison. Madison contacts him and says that I have brain cancer. So that's what the doctor told me. And I was like, okay. And he's like, now don't flip out because of cancer, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, I just want to know what the next step is. And he said, excellent question. Contact your provider. She will steer you the right way. Well, being good friends with Ann, I sent her a text and told her what had happened, checked the results. I'm supposed to get an appointment. Well, next thing I know, the next day, her assistant calls me and had already set up the appointment Ann had made. And I had to call my best friend to come pick me up to drive me because, of course, with double vision, you can't drive.
No. So, that's a good call.
Yeah. So my best friend, who's also named Julie, picks me up, and I wanted her, which at the time, thinking I'm really fine, and I'm not. I had her come in the ER or in the room with me, and she took notes while the provider was talking. And looking back, all of that's a fog. So the best thing I did was have my best friend take me. Well, Ann ordered a PET scan, which I had done. We've been tight friends for years. She took me for my PET scan at La Crosse. I came home, stepped up on the first step, which I have 3 steps into my house, got disoriented, spun around, and did a header right in the front yard. And she puts her car in park, comes running over. My friend Randy comes out of the house because he had a dog sit, because that's Randy. So he came out of the house, and the neighbor from across the street saw it happen, and he came over, and I'm on my hands and knees throwing up in the front yard, and I'm not sure what was going on at that point.
Oh my gosh.
So I went in the house. They helped me up. I got in the house, and a few days after that, and this is where it's a blur on timeline as far as how many days, but my best friend Julie called me because she thought, I should follow up and see how she's doing. Well, she got wigged out from my phone call and calls Ann, who's saying that, okay, Julie is lethargic. She's sleeping 16 to 20-hour days, and she's not eating. And Ann's response was, get her to the ER in La Crosse now. So Julie got off the phone, and keep in mind, this is where the smart thing by calling her to ask her to take me to the doctor came in, because Julie and I can go months without talking. We live 8 miles apart, but our lives are so busy that we don't always have time to talk.
That's friends, yeah.
That's exactly it. And being that Julie knew I was really ill, and especially cancer, decided to follow up on that. But she called my brother Jeff, who lives in Eau Claire. Jeff came down, called me on the way and says, I'm leaving Eau Claire. I'm coming to pick you up, and I'm taking you to the ER in La Crosse. So he did. Now, at this point, I was supposed to have been on vacation out near Washington, D.C. I had a cousin who was burying her husband at Arlington National Cemetery. I was going to be there to represent my family. And because I was so ill, I never made the trip. Mm-hmm. So I was going back and forth with my cousin and other friends I was supposed to visit and let them know that I was sick. I didn't tell anybody. And I asked my team, Julie, please don't say anything about the cancer yet, because I hadn't had a biopsy. It wasn't 100% official. And not only that, I'm not into the whole gossip thing or people assuming.
Right.
Well, it ended up, I got admitted. It was the 30th of August. And the 31st.
So that took about a minute to from the time you got sick until you were admitted. Yeah. Okay.
I would say all of this was in a span of 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So I got admitted on the 30th, and the first thing they did was a head to hip MRI. Then the next day, they did a biopsy. They had found on the MRI, and it was kind of fun if you've never had a biopsy. The biopsy, it wasn't fun.
But okay, I'm not for sure. Okay,
it was, and when I don't know something and I'm learning about something, that's kind of fun. Okay. However, it did hurt. I'm not going to lie. But you have the nurse who's got the overall picture, and then the doctor on this side, and the overall picture's on the computer. Then you have the doctor that's trying to zoom in my trunk area here, and he's trying to find a piece that he thought would be good for the biopsy. So I got one guy directing the other guy, and
you're awake.
And I'm awake through the whole thing. Oh, yeah. Okay. I mean, the painful part wasn't the biopsy itself. It was sedating the area. Okay. That part was painful. But it ended up that night, an oncologist came to see me. And he said to me, this was about 5:30 in the evening. The biopsy results had not come back. And he said, looking at your MRI and everything, I have to say you are definitely leaning toward brain cancer. And he said, the reason I'm here is because I want to get started with radiation as soon as possible. He said he couldn't be there the next morning when my med team met with me. He would, he was going to be gone, but he wanted to start radiation right away. And he said, I specialize in radiation. Chemo will not help with this. Radiation will help a little, but you're not going to live long.
Wow.
So again, I'm rather stoic. I'm accepting all of this because I felt there are so many people in the world who have cancer. I am not inevitable. If it's God's mission for some reason for me to have cancer, I will live with that. I will accept that. And so I asked him some questions, and he was very kind. And then he left.
Okay.
And that first thing I did was I called my mom. And I told her what the doctor had said. And at this point, my mom's like 250 miles away, maybe. And she wanted to come, but I didn't want her to, because if you knew my mother, you knew she was going to bring everything, including the kitchen sink, and camp out in a hotel for a few weeks. And I didn't want that. I didn't want people hanging in my room because I wasn't getting decent sleep, between the doctors doing all their stuff. And with the way I'm feeling, I could sleep in little spurts, and that was it. So it was like my brother came about 4 to 6, I don't know how many, 4 to 6 times during my duration. And he would bring his computer and just work at the couch. So if I fell asleep, he didn't bother me. He never did bother me. And I really was glad he was there, because he and I have been close his entire life. But in any case, I said to Mom, Mom, in all of this, my biggest fear is you might have to bury a third child. My mom at the time was 82. She's in great health, so I don't see her going away anytime soon. But she said to me, don't tell me that. And I said, Mom, I'm not afraid to die. I'm not afraid of any treatment that the doctors may have to do to me. But the biggest heartbreak for me is that you might have to lose a third child. Mm-hmm. And my mom said to me, well, I'm glad you told me that. And Mom has always been my rock. My mom has never flipped out on anything. She's never gotten over emotional. She's just always been a pillar of strength in our family. And so after I got off the phone and I decided I was going to go to sleep, I'm laying in bed thinking about last things I needed to take care of. One of them was Pastor Deb will take care of my funeral. Being the good friend she is. And just some other things. And the next morning, my med team came in super. In fact, I was just waking up. They normally came in around 10:30, and it was around 8 when they came in. And they said to me, we don't think you have cancer. I'm going, oh? And they said, yes, we found fungal cells in your biopsy. And I'm thinking, fungal cells?
Yeah, what's that?
So they said, we have contacted infectious disease at the hospital, and someone will be in sometime later in the day. I'm like, later in the day? That guy came in 15 minutes later like a bull in a china shop. He's all excited about this. And by then my brother happened to show up, and we're both sitting there looking at this guy going, what gives?
Yeah, where's this coming from?
Well, he asked probably a half hour, 45 minutes worth of questions. And then he says, I think I know what it is. I'm going to go down to the lab and take a sample of your biopsy and look under the microscope, which he did. And said, yep, 99.9% certain she has blastomycosis.
Which
okay,
is a big
blastomycosis, from what I've been told, is a fungal infection. It's extremely rare. 5% of the population acquire blastomycosis. Of that 5%, 1% has it spread to their central nervous system or their brain. Hello?
Yeah.
Very, very, very rare. That's why I want my story told. And so he ordered this amphotericin B, which the doctors call amphoterrible because the side effects are about as horrid as the side effects for chemo. But I got lucky. The worst of it was it wreaked havoc on my electrolytes. My potassium plummeted. My magnesium plummeted.
Okay.
So they were doing IVs, especially the potassium, because it was hardly budging. They were doing IVs of potassium and giving me these horse pill potassium pills. Well, I had to do 10 days. They were originally going to do, I think they said 16 days of the amphotericin B, but they ended up being 10. And the reason was it was starting to do things to my body, and they thought they'd see how well 10 would go. Well, it would be things because of the AMPO. They would give me the potassium IV and such. And then they would eventually, because they noticed it started causing some issues with my kidneys, he ordered a bolus. So it was getting to be, I was 24/7 IV of something.
Wow.
And the bolus would be before the AMPO. And a lot of these were taking like 2 hours to go through. It wasn't like it was a half hour. It was like 2 hours here, 2 hours there. The amphotericin had to be administered no sooner than 24 hours from the previous dose. But I really fared quite well. They warned me I could be sick from this, but I was really pretty good. Now, things that were happening to me, one of the things which I thought was really silly was they had a cord connected to my bed that if I got out of the bed, the sirens would sound because I was not allowed to be out on my own. And I thought that was silly because keep in mind, I never really thought I was sick.
Right.
Especially when I think about brain cancer, I'm thinking headaches. I never had a headache in all of this.
Right.
There were so many things I'm going, I feel fine. But I was falling down. Like I ended up doing 2 headers. The second time I did a header in my front yard, my dog had a leg that would give out. So I was carrying her down the steps, set her down, lost my bearings, and ended up doing another header. But it was more, I had to go through physical therapy. I had to go through occupational therapy. I started researching this blastomycosis and finding out that, wow, I was experiencing a lot of things like the balance issue. I lost my ability to write. Mm-hmm. And I found that out when my med team came skipping down, and I mean skipping down. They were pretty excited with all of this. But they came down to where I was doing my physical therapy, and they asked if they could study me because this is so extremely rare. And of course, I'm a little cautious on personal information. And I asked, what for? And they said, we want to educate medical personnel about blasto. I'm like, give me that pen because I'm thinking at this point, they're thinking cancer in the beginning, and it wasn't cancer. Well, I went to sign my name, and it was a scribble, and I write very neat, and I write large. Here it's a scribble, and I can't even write across. I'm scribbling down, and I'm going, what's wrong with my handwriting? Well, then I noticed I was having language issues. For example, I would talk about something, and then it could be a very simple word I couldn't come up with. And I remember telling a story and I couldn't think of the word I wanted to use. And I said, the place with playground equipment and park benches and picnic tables and trees. And they're like, you mean a park? And I'm going, yeah. And it just, those were things that bothered me. I'm like, what's going on? Because I'm not dumb.
Right.
But there were language issues. There were balance issues. There were writing issues. There were memory. And I still have short-term memory. I can remember things from back when I was 2 years old. But sometimes I can't remember what I did a couple hours earlier. Wow. Or something that I said. And I've talked to my specialist about this. And he said, well, you are 62 years old. There's that. But he did offer to have an evaluation done if I want to determine if it's age or if it's the result from this. Now, brain scans, I don't know if you saw any of my brain scans on Facebook. The brain scans now, the MRIs, look clear. So it does not look like there's any issues. There's a couple of spots that they've determined are scar tissue, but overall, everything is fine. There are moments I'm totally proud of myself that I can remember stuff, but there are moments that I'm going, gosh, how many times do I have to look at the same thing in the last 10 minutes and still can't remember?
So with this all, and the story is amazing because you're here today.
Mhm.
You're driving.
Well,
You're-
in fact, my brother Jeff just told me probably a month and a half ago that when I was finally diagnosed with the blasto, the specialist gave me a 20% chance of survival. He didn't tell me that then. So,
but you called your mom, and I'm not afraid of dying. I wanna go here,
Sure.
because not afraid to die. If you guys have any questions for Julie about the thing, she said that it would be okay. I just said something wrong in my head. But you'd be okay with answering questions too. So if you have questions, put them in the comments. But your faith. You called your mom. I'm not afraid to die.
mhm,
And then you said a lot of people have cancer. You're not exempt.
mhm.
So where does that faith come in for you?
I think it was my upbringing.
Okay.
My grandmother was very dedicated to her church and her God, and she raised her two children the same way, and my mother raised us the same way. And it was Sunday school, confirmation class. I was a Sunday school teacher when I was 16. I just had a strong faith in God. And there were times, yes, I've been angry with God. There were times that I resented, maybe. That was in my younger years. But as I've gotten older, I look back going, he knows what he's doing. It doesn't make sense to us at the time, but he knows what he's doing. And I just have learned, okay, if this happens, it was meant to be. And if this doesn't happen because something else is happening, that was meant to be. And I just learned to live with that. And sometimes it's been kind of fun. Oh, now I know why this didn't happen. And I'll give you an example. So my father was in early stages of dementia, and we're looking at about 7 years ago.
Okay.
I take that back, 6 years ago. It was really at the beginning of COVID. And my mom was starting to become frustrated dealing with his issues. He's always been a stubborn man, but having dementia made it worse. So I thought maybe what I need to do is find a job and move up by them. I wasn't going to sell my house, but I was going to go up there and help mom out. Well, there was this job. This was like my ideal job. I thought, it was going to end up being a lot more money. It wasn't going to be in the school anymore, but it was using my expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So I prayed on it. And actually, what I said was, whatever you feel I need to do, steer me the right way. So I interviewed. I had to do it online because of the quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
So I did it online, and I was not happy with the interview. There were 3 people involved. One, she was new. She was the head of the position. I was not thrilled with her methods of things to begin with. Another one was a guy they added on who's been involved with the state for years. And he, half the time, I don't know what he was doing, if he was playing games online or something, but the other 2 girls were saying, hey, it's your turn. And he just didn't seem too invested in it. And so I found out, not from them, somewhere else, that I didn't get the job. I wasn't upset about it because I did say, wherever you go, apparently God wanted me to stay at the school. And as it was, 7 months later, my father died from COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have been stuck probably doing a job, which has totally changed since then, and I wouldn't have liked it.
Right.
So it all worked out for the best. I was never unhappy. I just had to figure out what it was I was going to do to help my mom and my dad.
And that's awesome. So we put on Psalm 38:7-5, depend on the Lord, trust in him, and he will help you. And I just think that is something, that's what you said, you kind of live by.
Yes.
And depending on God in all circumstances. And when they told you you had brain cancer,
Yes.
and then the next morning doing flips and having Skippy people come in and say, yes, yes, yes. And answered prayers. And the thing is that, so there was faith,
Mm-hmm.
and you had a lot of people praying for you.
I found that out later on.
You had a lot of people. I remember that we were all praying. Tina says on her thing, faith. What an incredible word. Biblically, faith is considered a belief and a trust in God based on good evidence, but without total proof.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah.
To have faith, we must trust that God is there and working on our behalf, even though we can't see him with our own eyes. In fact, the word faith originates from the Latin word, help me here. It means to trust.
Fidere.
Fidere?
Yeah.
It means to trust. So hi, Chad. It's nice having you here. So in this faith, in trusting God through all life's channels.
I have to say, I love you, Tina, because I have worked with Tina for quite a few years.
Yes,
And
yes.
she just retired. So
Yeah, so
enjoy your retirement, Tina.
Absolutely, absolutely. So as we're going through this and walking in faith, I think, and that's one thing. So all you guys online, and this is one thing, have you ever, what part of Julie's story can you connect with? Is it walking in faith? Because the storm was not there. You didn't even feel that you were ill. And I'm just picturing this for myself, is like you were walking with bubble wrap around you, knowing that it's going to be okay regardless of what they tell you. You weren't shaken. You know,
Right.
maybe a little bit, but not. But you were more worried about your mom and yourself.
I was worried about so many things and so grateful I was done teaching, because I remember many years ago I had another near fatal illness, not as bad, but at one point the doctor thought it could have been cancer, and I was like, wait a minute, I am way too busy for cancer. I had a senior who was my first 4-year college bound student ever, and I had so much going on back in 1991, 92. It was like, no, but I was glad to be done. I've still been a resource for my former students, many of my former students over the years, but it was like, no, if this is meant to be, this is meant to be. My time on earth is done. But no, he has other plans, obviously. So
God has other plans. Hey, Miranda. Hi, cutie. So God has other plans. And as we're going through this, the one thing, and like I said, I keep thinking about your story. I keep thinking about all of the things that you survived, something that as a 1% of the population, is it normally fatal? Is it I mean,
yes.
that 1% would have been.
In fact, one of the doctors on my med team had told me, where my specialist was pretty quiet about death and stuff, this other doctor did tell me they had recently, like a couple months earlier, had a patient with blastoma. I don't know if it was, in fact, some call it neuroblastomycosis because it spreads to the brain and such, but I'm not sure if it was that. But the doctor said he died. And so there are people out there who have died. I don't know if it's because of the severity or if it's how long they've had it,
or maybe other contributing factors.
Because the specialist told Jeff, my brother, and this was day 3 in the hospital, said, had she waited maybe an extra day or 2, she wouldn't have lived. So I was like, oh, okay. And I mean, I never got upset about that either. In fact, people have even asked me about, are you going to go after the doctors that gave you a false diagnosis? And my response is absolutely not. And the reason is, blasto is very rare. Medical personnel, that's why my doctors, my team wants to study so that they can educate. They were already educating the medical personnel at Gunderson. And for the radiologist in Madison to call the ER doctor and come out and say, hey, she's got brain cancer, that shouldn't have been said. I think the best way could be, there's something we're concerned about. We need to do more tests. Not throw out that cancer term, because not everyone deals with cancer the way I did.
Right. Oh, absolutely not. Not at all.
So no, I'm not angry. I want medical personnel to get educated. I want everybody to get educated. And this is a disease, my gosh, if you looked at my brain MRI at that time, it looks very similar to cancer. So I can see, and I mean, the doctors I think they were doing the best they could. I hold no anger, no ill will, nothing. I am very grateful to all the medical personnel. And at least they found that it was serious enough to warrant immediate attention rather than blow it off. But
so, and I think too with this, and like I said, just kind of throwing this out there, I think that God created you to be as strong as you are in your faith and in your walk. And the students, just think of the students, because I remember, how many of you remember praying for Julie when she was in the hospital? So if you're in there, just say, I did. If you prayed for Julie, or you've seen the post when she was going through this life-changing experience. But the thing is that I do believe we're all created for purpose.
mm-hmm.
What if your purpose was not only to give one of your students the strength to pray for you at a time when they never prayed before in their life, but the love that they had for you,
Sure.
They knew that could have been. So this is not only life-changing for you, but it could have been healing for so many other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then for God to say, hey, you know what? It's not your time. I got more work for you to do. Come on, let's go over here. And then for you to be able to be an example, to be that observation for those doctors who are learning. And because of the, of the rarity of the disease, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, I feel like I'm in the presence of what God is doing. That is awesome, because the story is one of not only faith, it is a story of healing, but it's trust.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's trust. And then you worrying about your mom in the middle of your own storm,
mm-hmm.
because for some reason, like I said, it's like you have bubble wrap around you.
Oh, yeah.
You weren't worried about your storm. You were worried about all of the other things. I'm sure you're worried about your dog.
And I'm always worried about my dog. Yeah, in fact, I got to add this funny note. So I ended up being in the hospital 2 weeks, and my girlfriend Cindy brought me home. And she's bringing my stuff into the house, and I go to open the door, and Zoe is right at the doorstep, and she's not letting me in, and she's growling at me. And I'm like, what are you doing? And if you knew Zoe was a rescue. I think she may have been abused before we got her, but for the last 12 years of her life, I was her forever home. And she grew a huge attachment to my friend Randy. Those two, I mean, I've never seen a human and a dog be more alike than those two. But I think what had happened, because I ended up in the hospital unexpectedly, Randy stayed at my house for 2 weeks, taking care of Zoe. And either she was mad at me for being gone so long, or she thought I was invading Randy's house. But she will hear Randy drive up the street and start yip, 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 yip. And it would drive me nuts. I come to the house, open the door, and she's growling at me. I'm like, hey, I'm going to pay the big bucks for your food and your medical treatment and everything else. But yeah, that was kind of the funny out of all of it, I think.
Oh, absolutely. But you know what? But there's a rainbow at the end. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
A rainbow at the end. But once again, we never know how our story is going to affect somebody. Right. Randy may have needed a tighter connection with Zoe.
Yep.
And you gave him that opportunity. I mean, but he had that opportunity. So Lessa has seizures. And so Lessa said, you're like me, you just push through this. Absolutely. Wessa,
Absolutely.
we interviewed Wessa and her mom a couple weeks ago, and Wessa's been on the porch a very long time with us. So,
sure.
but yeah, so absolutely. Hi, Marge. It's nice to see you here. And you know what, Miranda, Wessa is certainly a rock star. And so
That sounds awesome.
yeah.
Keep it up, Wessa.
It is. And so, but like I said, there's so much in our world that we don't understand.
Mhm.
So right now we're working on, and so the series that I'm working on is you're seen
Mhm.
is the whole thing. And last week we talked about people being seen and how that works.
Mhm.
In the midst of all your medical issues, you let your mom know that she was seen.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
let the doctors know by, and your brother or your friends. Team Julie knew that they were seen and they were necessary and needed.
And as soon as my med team left after the news, I called my mother back to let her know. So, but she said, in my mind, it just didn't seem like you were that sick. Well, I shouldn't say that sick, but to have the cancer, to be terminal. She said just something, mother's intuition or something. She just figured everything was going to be fine. She's my rock.
That's awesome. That
She's
is
my
awesome.
rock.
And so as we're going to do, so guys on here, like I said, Julie has, and you still have the effects. So you said the short-term memory.
That's pretty much it. Everything
okay?
else is pretty well gone. I can write back the same way I used to. I don't fall anymore. I mean, I'm a klutz, but I've never done headers except those 2 times. But no, in fact, it was really, and I love experiencing new things. And even though that it wasn't a good time and everything, looking back, as I said, things made sense and why I was having to go through PT, because I'm like, really, I'm fine. It was like they weren't listening, but no, I wasn't fine. In fact, they would have me walk through a maze. I was still, in fact, it was I think the day before I was discharged, I finally could see one again, but I had double vision the entire time I was in the hospital pretty much. But I would have to walk through mazes and I'd be doing this because then I could see one. Otherwise, I wasn't sure what I was going to be walking into and what I wasn't. And I found they wanted me to balance on one foot. I could not do that. I'm like, well, that's weird. I'd have to grab onto something. I'd have to take steps. I had to work on getting in and out of a car. So I was learning that, wow, I'm really not okay here. Although at the time before I started doing the research, it wasn't making sense as to why this wasn't working.
Right.
But the areas that the lesions were happening in the brain were the reasons that I was losing balance and all this other stuff. But yeah, once I went through, and I'm still on medication. I was prescribed voriconazole when I was discharged. I had to take twice a day. After a year, he lessened the dosage to once a day. And when I met with him in February, he said, well, we could take you off the voriconazole altogether, and then you don't have to see me anymore. And I thought about that, and to me, I didn't feel ready. I thought, I want to try. I said, let's do 6 more months and revisit this. I see him next month.
Okay.
And he was fine with that. He offered 3 medications. One was the voriconazole once a day. And all 3 had their pros and cons. And I just decided to stay with the voriconazole because it was working. My body was fine with it. I didn't want to mess with a new drug and then it not be working okay. But
so 3 years ago this happened?
2
years ago.
2 years. So in August, I will choose to be finished with the voriconazole. Okay. I figured 2 years was long enough. Because keep in mind, like cancer, I am not going to be cured of this, but I can go in remission. And
so that's what my next step. So you're not cured of this. So it could reoccur.
It could. I'm not exactly certain how I acquired it, okay. And neither is the doctor. We've talked about some things. Now, blastomycosis is a fungus that's acquired from watery, swampy, marshy areas, decayed trees, things like that. Well, here I'm up in the North Woods. My mom lives on a lake. Okay. And it could have, I never went down to the lake because I was taking care of mom. So I was mostly in the house. And except for letting Zoe out once or twice, and she didn't go anywhere. So I think either I had a floating spore that I inhaled, or the doctor said I could have acquired it somewhere and it lied dormant in my body for a while.
Okay,
So not entirely certain about that.
okay.
But it has made me hesitant. Now, we've had a cabin up in Eagle River my entire life.
Okay.
And I thought at the time, I have swam in that lake, I have walked along the shore, I've gone fishing, boating, hung my feet up. Why, after 60 years, did all of a sudden I acquire this? Because blasto does happen more up there.
Okay.
And up in the UP, Michigan. It also, they said, closest around here would be the Mississippi River Valley between Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And I hadn't been that direction.
Okay.
So not entirely certain how I got this.
And so, but and like I said, so I want to go to some of the things. Marge said, God keeps us busy. So we think of all of our problems. He wants us to reach out to others, not focus on us. And when we focus on other people, it really does take away from our thoughts, because we can get in our own heads pretty easy.
Oh, sure.
You know,
Absolutely.
and so as you're focusing on the other people and the things, yeah, I agree with that, Marge. I think that is one of the ways that we do deal with things.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Diane. It's nice having you. And she says, praise for your healing and the medical team and faith. Absolutely.
Amen.
And so, guys, Chad is asking for, let's see here, asking for prayers. And this is why we're here. So if you do have any prayer requests, put them in the comments. We have 8 or 9 minutes. So, but he's asking for, he has a doctor appointment for cerebral spinal fluid leaks. He had 3 surgeries 4 years ago, but the doctor's thinking and going through it again. Well, Chad, we will absolutely be keeping you in our prayers and very close. Please keep us updated. And guys, everybody lift up Chad tonight in your prayers. Hi, Margie. It's nice having you here. Hello, Rhonda. Nice having you here. And do you, she said, do you know the Varsity family? I do not, and no. So sorry about that. But if you want, we can certainly lift them up in our our prayers. And Miranda said she had a friend who passed away from fungal infection that went to the brain. And so please continue to pray for my husband, Peter. Absolutely, Tina.
Absolutely, Tina.
Peter is in the top of our prayers.
And he's always smiling. At least when I see him, he's always smiling.
Yeah,
Such a good guy.
So, and he got it from swimming in a creek. So that's where he got it from. So, we never know. We never know. But
I hadn't been in any water or nothing. So.
But it could have like dormant, they said.
Absolutely.
I mean, that could have been something.
It's been a long time since I've been in the lake in Eagle
Right.
River up there.
Yeah, right,
It's been
right.
a very long time,
Yeah.
but that's why I'm thinking it might have been a spore blowing around that I happened to inhale. That's the only thing I can think of, because I haven't even crawled over dead logs or anything like that. So
it's time to go hiking then, huh?
no, but I'll tell you, I really had a hard time wanting to go to Eagle River for family Christmas that Christmas. But then I thought, it's winter, so it can't be too bad. But then when I was up there last summer, I was a little apprehensive, but I think I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I just pray on it and just go with it.
Absolutely. So as we're wrapping up, like I said, put all your prayer requests in the comments. Let us know if there's anything that we can pray up for you. And then, and like I said, just like with Julie's story, and I really want to thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you for letting me be here.
Because like I said, there are so many times in our world that we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
In the night, I keep going through my head, brain cancer. I probably would have freaked out a lot more than you did, but hopefully my faith is strong enough that, I could say, hey, you know what? We got to just do the process. We got to walk through this together. God will be with us. And then, and like I said, we need to just continue to have that faith and know. But just like here, asking for prayers and asking for prayers for other people.
Absolutely.
And praying other people up, guys, is so important. And so Margie is asking for continued prayers for Robin, and we will continue to do that. And Cheryl is praying for everyone. Thank you, Cheryl, for that. But like I said, as we go through this, and I think that's why the porch is so cool for me, is that it doesn't matter where you're from or where you are. God is here with us. He's there with you. He's allowing us to share our stories. So you that are going through testing and you that are going through things, that Julie's strength as she walked through her disease and she walked through her medical issues and she walked through telling people and then her dog growling at her because he was upset that she wasn't there soon enough. But all of these things are real life happenings. Our world is not butterflies and rainbows as we tell our kids. And you know what? It's okay.
And I gotta say with that, I grew up in a family. We didn't have tragedy. We didn't have bad things happen. Both my parents were married to each other their entire married lives. I wouldn't say we were anything like the Cleaver family,
but you were blessed.
But I was blessed. And the first tragedy we had in our family was the motor vehicle accident of my brother. I was out east on vacation, and it was like, holy cat.
Remember that?
Yeah. It just totally blew me out of the water. And I always wondered growing up and then some, how would I respond to something like that? I was very stoic. I didn't get all bent out of shape. I was glad I was with my friends. I asked my mom what she needed from me, and she said, stay where you're at till we know what's going on, because the accident was in South Dakota. So nobody in my family was home. We were all scattered. My dad and Randy went up to visit my dad, and they took a road trip up into the UP. And that's when they got the call that my brother was killed. I was just had gone on a 4-hour drive to Ocean City, Maryland from my friend's house. And he's like, what do you want to do now? Do you want to go back home? And I'm like, no. I said, Mom said, stay where we're at. We drove 4 hours to get here. Let's enjoy the ocean. And I never got, all upset about it. I just figured it was God's way. And I miss my brother a lot. It's been 10 years. I mean, he's the sibling I grew up with the longest. But my mom and we always said Joel was the favorite child. Mom always denied it, but we're like, yeah, right. But
now you know.
But we didn't care. But she even was so stoic through all of that. Yeah. I'm sure she grieved in her own way, but that's just how we are. Half the family would be mush, half of us, and my brother Jeff and I and my mom were the strongest.
We were just talking about that on the porch, finding your peace. And Julie, I think you have your peace.
I've had my peace for quite a while.
And that is something, if you do not have your peace, that will be my prayer for all of you, is that you can find your peace. And Tina says, hugs and prayers to all. And Lessa, I love praying for other people. I know, honey, you do. You are our prayer warrior for sure. And Chad says, praying for all in need. And Chad, we are praying for you as well. So we're going to wrap up with prayer.
Absolutely.
And then we're going to, but if you have any other prayer requests, keep putting them in the comments. And then we'll go from there. So let's pray. Gracious God, thank you for this time. Thank you for Julie and for her opportunity to tell this story, a story that she shouldn't have possibly had a chance to tell. But God, thank you for her strength. Thank you for the wisdom that she's had. Thank you for her passion for teaching all of these children for so many years with a love and a peace that only you can give. So thank you for giving her that background in raising her up in the church and raising her up in her faith. God, we ask that you're with everybody tonight and all of the prayer requests that will be here tonight and in the future. Hear our prayers. We know you do. We know you hear our hearts and even the unsaid prayers. Thank you for loving us. We love you, God. It's in your name we pray. And they all said, Amen. Amen. So I want to thank everybody. And so here's the thing is On the Porch Ministries is a very, very small but mighty ministry. And so it is because of your support and your love that we can continue to do what we do. So I want to thank all of the people from around the world who are supporting the ministry and who are part of this and who have just been here. And by support, I don't mean just financial support, by your prayers. You're coming on and being part of the team online and coming to worship on the farm. There's so many aspects of this. And I really want to thank you for all of that. So prayers tonight, and that was our call for Vicki as well. So add Vicki to your prayers. But know tonight that you are important, that you are necessary, and that you are loved. I love you. God loves you. And that you are seen right where you are. Have a great night, everybody. God bless. And once again, thank you so much, Julie, for coming on my porch.
Thank you for listening.
Guys, have a great night, everybody. God bless. See you in the morning. Love you all.